Welcome to Counselor, Beyond Conventional Defense.
Hello and welcome to Counselor, Beyond Conventional Defense, the podcast that challenges the traditional approach to criminal defense and takes a deeper look at how the criminal justice system can evolve with attorney William Pernik, a trailblazer in criminal defense whose approach is anything but conventional. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and today's episode is all about what to look for in a great lawyer. William, welcome back.
Thank you, Kevin. Good to be here.
All right, let's set the stage. Can you describe the fundamental role of an attorney in a criminal case and why it's so crucial?
Yes, Kevin. So in a criminal case, an attorney will play an outsized role, far greater than in a case involving, for example, some form of civil litigation, when only money and not a person's freedom or liberty is at stake. A criminal defense attorney is tasked with enormous responsibilities. An attorney in a criminal case has to make sure that their client's rights are protected through the legal process. They have to provide expert legal advice. They have to craft strategic defenses, and they have to advocate on behalf of their client in order to achieve the best possible outcomes. And it's critical in this particular setting because the stakes are so incredibly high, often involving clients' liberty and future. Sometimes it could result in a person losing their professional license if there is a conviction of a certain kind. And more recently, it could significantly impact the rights of people who are not citizens, leading a person to sustain even a minor conviction and then lose their legal status in the country, get deported, be denied naturalization, re-entry, or adjustment of status. And that's really, really significant in today's society.
Definitely. Yeah, very topical. Some people might have a perception that all attorneys are the same, but obviously that's not the case. And what you're doing is very different from others. What are the different types of lawyers that a person may hire, and how does a person who needs a lawyer select the right one?
That's a really good question, Kevin. I think all lawyers are certainly not the same. Not all lawyers, first of all, are good lawyers. Some people are just bad at what they do, or they might be good people, but they're just not well qualified to handle a criminal case because criminal law is very different and very nuanced, and you are dealing with much different responsibilities when somebody's life or freedom is at stake. But putting aside the fact that some lawyers are just not good at what they do or not qualified to do what they are accepting when they get hired on a case, there are also significant differences in how different types of criminal defense lawyers perceive their roles and envision their relationships with their clients. And so my fundamental belief is that it's really important for the attorney and the client, before they enter into this really incredible relationship, attorney-client relationship, to be on the same page. Just like when you enter into a dating relationship, a romantic relationship, you want to make sure that you and your partner are on the same page about what your expectations are. You want to make sure when you work with a professional like a criminal defense attorney, you want to make sure that your attorney believes in his or her role the same way as you imagine it, so that your interests and your philosophies are aligned, and that calls for a discussion on what these different types of philosophies are. I'll give you a really good example. There is a big division in my field between lawyers who believe, for example, in something that I would call the client autonomy model. This is essentially a continuation of the discussion, if you will, of free will versus determinism, right? The kind of things we heard about in college or maybe studied in a philosophy class. So some lawyers really, really firmly believe that if their client wants to pursue a particular course of conduct, even if it is to their own detriment, they should allow the client to do it because, after all, it's the client's life. What that means in practice, let's say you have a client in custody who does not want to pursue treatment, who wants to get out and get high, does not want to stop the behavior that led him to getting in trouble in the first place. Lawyers feel like, hey, not my place to judge. I'm just here to follow my client's wishes. My client wants to get out. My job is to get him out. That's right. To be contrasted with a completely different school of thought, which is more client-centric, or I guess holistic in nature. I call it the guided outcome model, and that aligns much more closely with the model of a criminal defense that I practice, the counselor model. In this particular role, attorneys view themselves as advisors and counselors to their clients. They don't believe that their role is simply to blindly follow their clients' wishes, even if that is to their client's detriment. Instead, they believe that they need to have difficult conversations with their clients. that they need to not run away from inconvenient truths, but confront them, that they need to build a client-attorney relationship that allows for frank discussions about these things, and then they need to guide and steer their clients towards the right decision. Now, granted, California law, for example, provides that certain decisions are always ultimately the decisions that a client will have to make. A decision whether or not to accept a plea bargain, a decision whether or not to testify, the right to a jury trial, for example. But that doesn't mean that an attorney shouldn't advise it, and that attorney should ignore a client who's making the wrong decision. I argue with my clients passionately, and I like to tell my clients why I'm doing that. And I think most people understand it. And especially when you deal with a person who is mentally ill, who is going through a mental health crisis, substance abuse episode, they're not really in the best state of mind when they're dealing with these issues to make the right decisions. So I really believe that the counselor model that me and the attorneys in my firm subscribe to is a better model, because while it respects the client's right to make these individual decisions, it allows them to make these decisions after receiving appropriate professional advice and guidance. And I really think that's the role of an attorney, the role of an advisor and a counselor. And sometimes that means saying things that other person does not want to hear, just like your parents might tell you things that you don't want to hear when you're doing something you shouldn't be doing. And I think that's part of who we are, or at least supposed to be, in my view. But where we run into problem is when you have a client who just feels that I'm hiring a lawyer to give me a voice, and I just want them to repeat in court what I'm saying so they effectuate my wishes, and the lawyer they hire does not subscribe to that philosophy or ideology, and that's where you have a conflict. And so it's important to make sure when you look for an attorney to have a frank discussion with your attorney about the kind of attorney that they are and the kind of work that they do and their vision for representing you, so that your idea aligns with the type of philosophy that your attorney will practice. Otherwise, you're going to have a conflict.
Sort of like the customer is always right. The concept that some people feel, is an idea, but in law it might be a little different, right? Like, and maybe for different models might interpret that idea differently.
So I really like that you brought that up, because in our society, in American culture, we all grow up with this concept that customer is always right. And obviously that falls directly into the client autonomy model. It also falls into a second type of representation that sometimes customers shop for because they don't understand the different approaches. And that is a transactional model or transactional approach to legal representation, as opposed to a relational or counselor model that I believe in and I'm trying to promote. In a transactional approach, a client hires a lawyer, any lawyer, to do one specific task, or maybe a series of very specific, uncomplicated tasks. For example, hey, me and my tenant have agreed that he's going to rent this property from me. Can you just draft it up for me so we have a lawful lease that complies with the law? Or I want to leave all of my property to my wife, Susie, and I need somebody to draft a will. Can you just put something together quickly that effectuates my wishes? Something like that. Or when I hire, for example, a research attorney, and I need him to research a specific legal issue and provide me a memorandum, which I do sometimes if the issue is particularly complex, I'm not really looking to start an ongoing relationship in connection with this issue. I just want one specific task. And so lawyers sometimes are being approached with an understanding that, hey, any lawyer is as good as any other lawyer, and I'm paying for this outcome. But that's not really what a relational model does. When you view the case through the lens of a counselor model or a relational model, really this is no longer about you paying a fixed amount for a specific service or outcome. This is you investing in a relationship or strategic partnership with an attorney, somebody who's going to try and understand you, your life, your story, your background, how you came to be in this situation, will interpret the case through the lens of that insight and understanding and guide you along the way, not only looking to solve the immediate problem, but perhaps provide you a more enriched guidance and advice to counsel you and potentially save you a lot of headaches and a lot of risks and a lot of unpleasant experiences down the road. Attorneys who practice in a relational model or what I call a counselor model will often bring with them a lifetime of experience dealing with a lot of people who go through similar problems. How many couples do criminal defense lawyers like myself counsel with all the time? How many times do I deal with somebody who is a victim of domestic violence, who's charged with domestic violence, who finds themselves in a position where certain allegations are brought against them, but when I look at their background, I understand how this came about. And so I will oftentimes be able to enrich this client's life and experience in their personal and professional journey by introducing them to people within my own professional network. I'll introduce them to therapists that I know. I will connect them with the right experts. I will connect them with other advisors. I sometimes will have them work with a live counselor. I will connect couples who go through a domestic violence episode with couples counseling, with individual therapy, with psychotherapy, with substance use counseling. This could be anger management. It could be parenting classes. You really could identify so many issues and lean on your lifetime of experience in working with thousands of people who confronted similar situations and really provide your clients with the best of your beliefs and your solutions to their problems. And you would not necessarily get that. You simply have a person who says, hey, I'm looking to hire a lawyer to do this one specific task. I just want you to make an appearance for me. I just want you to handle this case. If you look at it transactionally, you're just going to miss out on all of these things that a professional will bring with him or with her when they act as your counselor and advisor. And that leads also to this notion of, false economy, of low cost representation, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask you about that as far as like you talked about transactional. In that situation, people are also probably looking for the best price.
Yes, if you are only looking to hire a lawyer and any lawyer is the same as any other lawyer, and you do not truly appreciate that a lawyer who practices with a different philosophy can bring you a lot of additional value by providing you with guidance, by negotiating your case on much better terms, by helping you avoid much greater problems down the road, like problems with losing a protected immigration status, losing your professional license, problem in family court down the road because somebody carelessly may have pled you to an offense involving domestic violence. And before you know it, now there's a family court proceeding and you're presumed to not have custody of your kids. So when you connect with a person who actually acts as your life advisor, as your counselor, and who looks out for you in so many different ways, that's very different than you shopping for the lowest price to do the quickest possible representation. And the worst combination, I think, is when you have a person who is approaching legal representation transactionally and also finds a lawyer who subscribes to the client autonomy model, because that allows the lawyer to do very lazy, uninspired work and get away with it under the guise of, hey, this is exactly what my client asked me to do. I just gave him what he wanted. And
Right.
the problem there is, this could result in inadequate attention. It could result in really poor legal outcomes. It could lead to significantly higher costs in the long run. And I can tell you that I experience that often because people come to me all the time asking me to fix damage caused by other people who they hired for a fraction of the cost that me or one of my competent colleagues would charge. And then they end up spending a lot more resources, a lot more time, and a lot more headache and emotional capital trying to fix a problem that could have been avoided in the
Trying to
first
make it
place if
right.
they used the
Yeah.
qualified professional. You could have somebody end up with a plea that was quick but was not properly explained, including all of its future implications, including collateral consequences on professional licensure, on person's employment, on person's immigration status. You could end up with a superficially satisfactory but ultimately detrimental outcome. And so the counselor model prevents that by providing comprehensive guidance and ensuring that the client fully understands all of the potential consequences and can rely on the judgment of a trusted advisor whose role is to look out truly for the client's best interest.
Do you have situations where a client might want to just get out of jail quickly, like, take the easy way out, but they obviously suffer from some sort of substance abuse or mental health issue? Do lawyers have any rules or guidance on what to do in those situations?
Absolutely. You and I had a fascinating conversation with Adina, one
Yeah,
of my clients, and she was
right.
exactly that client. And if you recall, in my conversation with Adina, I mean, I've had dozens of phone calls with this young lady when she would call and complain and, cry and try to convince me. But yet, in the same time, she never actually exercised the nuclear option of, William, I'm commending you to go and enter a plea of guilty to this charge for me so I could get out. And I truly believe that somewhere in the back of her mind, she knew I was looking out for her. That's something I communicated from the first time I met this really incredible young lady in jail. And so I was able to build on that connection in order to continue to persuade her. Hey, just buy me a couple of weeks. Hey, I know you're going through a hard time. I promise you it's going to work out. Just let's try this. Or I know this didn't work. Let me just try this one last thing. And if that doesn't work, I promise you I'll do what you want. And then you live to fight another day. But it's very difficult. It's not economically advantageous to a lawyer, because most of the time criminal defense attorneys will get paid on flat fee basis. That's another topic we haven't covered. How do lawyers get paid? Either they get paid by the hour, which is more common in civil cases, or they get paid a fixed amount to do the entire job, which is what's most common in criminal cases. So if an attorney can get out of a case by entering a quick plea, not spending a year and a half or 2 years trying to fix their client's life, trying to get them into treatment programs and collect the same amount of money, what's the incentive to do it? You know what I mean?
Good hourly rate then for them. Becomes a good hourly rate. Yeah.
And yet I can assure you there are people with big hearts who are very conscientious, who will do exactly that, contrary to their own economic self-interest. And obviously, we have examples of the very opposite. But once you factor in how lawyers get paid, you can begin to understand why there is so much quick, sloppy, uninspired, lazy work that really hurts people. And that's what I want to avoid. And I think it's very important that we try to avoid it, especially when we consider implications. Now, you asked me about what guidance does the law provide. So lawyers are governed by code of ethics. Just like doctors have code of conduct, so do we. But this code of conduct does not actually tell us what to do when you have a client who wants to do something contrary to their own interest. We know that if a client wants to kill somebody and you believe him, you can rat him out. You can break the oath of confidentiality. That's the only exception we really have if you truly believe that your client poses danger of harm to another person. We know that there are certain decisions that a client is allowed to make, like the decision to plead out, the decision to testify, or to go to trial. Strategic and tactical decisions, like what motions to file, how to handle the proceedings, those are up to the lawyer. But it doesn't provide moral guidance. What I draw inspiration from is a very obscure rule of professional responsibility. It's actually Rule 2.1, and that's a rule that defines the role of an attorney as an advisor. And that's a rule that talks about how lawyers should act as advisors, even when it involves saying things to the client that are unwanted or difficult to hear. To me, this often overlooked rule is at the heart of what being an attorney means, not just being an attorney, but also being a counselor at law. To me, this rule emphasizes how important it is to provide candid advice, to consider clients' overall well-being, even if it means talking about uncomfortable truths. And to me, that's what the essence of the counselor model is all about, which prioritizes a person's long-term success and well-being over immediate and potentially harmful decisions. And I really want to revive the focus on this rule. I think we have forgotten about it. I think we don't talk about it enough. But to me, that's central to what being an attorney is. And so looking ahead, when I'm trying to share my vision for how we should practice the law within this counselor model, I really want this model to influence the future of my profession within my specific field of criminal defense. And I hope it will.
Do you think it can?
Yes, I absolutely think it can. I think that this model can and will lead to much more client-centered approach. I think it can produce far superior legal outcomes. And I think it will also lead to much more satisfactory experiences for the lawyers. Because one of the things that I hope to talk about at some point on this podcast is attorney well-being. When you do the kind of work that I do, it actually affects you profoundly. It affects your mental health. Chronic exposure to trauma and stress affects people who are exposed to it. But when you work within this model, you get to benefit also mentally, spiritually, and professionally from seeing the right thing happen to clients who need it so much. And so I think when attorneys try practicing law within this model, they will derive real meaning and significance from the career that they chose, that they devote so much time to. And I think it's a superior way to be. It's the right way to be. And we should always try to do the right thing. even when it's difficult.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it's an interesting model and it's fascinating to hear about. Thank you for tuning in to Counselor Beyond Conventional Defense with attorney William Pernik. To connect with William and his team, head to perniklaw.com and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. We got lots more about this method to come in your way, and it's very fascinating stuff. So we're happy to have you on board. William, so happy that you joined me today. Really looking forward to the next one.
My pleasure, Kevin. Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.